I'm David Sirota in for Michael Shore. The media world is shifting into the hands of a few billionaire citizen Kanes. What does it mean for news consumers, freedom of the press, and democracy in America? Over the next hour, we'll explore those issues. The War Room starts right now. Yesterday, uber-rich Amazon founder Jeff Bezos became the newest member of the Billionaire Newspaper Owners Club when he scooped up the Washington Post for a cool $250 million. He joins a long and growing list that includes, among others, real estate mogul Sam Zell, Aussie Rupert Murdoch, energy tycoon Phil Anschutz, former richest man in the world Warren Buffett, and just this weekend, Boston Red Sox owner John Henry. So who cares? Newspapers are dying anyway, right? Let the billionaires gobble them up before they go under. Not so fast. A 2009 report by the Audit Bureau of Circulations showed that not only do 75% of adults still read newspapers, but local and online news overwhelmingly originates from traditional papers like the Washington Post. That means that even if not every American reads a newspaper, most of their news still originates there. It just gets filtered through their local Ron Burgundys. The idea that newspapers have been marginalized and replaced by the internet is a total fallacy. Newspapers still set the terms of the political debate in America. That gives them the kind of power that Charles Foster Kane dreamed of.
People will think
what I tell them to think.
As Salon's Alex Perrine wrote today, billionaires don't buy newspapers to run them as public goods, and smart billionaires don't buy newspapers to make money. Billionaires buy newspapers for influence. Jeff Bezos is a man who can afford that kind of influence. The purchase price of $250 million is less than 1% of his $28 billion net worth. $28 billion. So is Bezos just bored? Is he just a rich guy buying a new toy? Well, he might not be as ideologically outspoken as Rupert Murdoch or the Koch brothers, but his company is definitely politically engaged. Under his leadership, Amazon has vigorously opposed antitrust legislation, a proposed internet sales tax, and the anti-piracy bill, SOPA. Amazon has also lobbied for lower taxes. And the company was, until 2012, a member of ALEC, the conservative policy group that engineered harsh voter ID requirements and stand-your-ground gun laws. Bezos himself has directly contributed to politicians from both parties, funded ballot measures, and been a major supporter of gay marriage. As for his views on press freedom, this is the guy who pulled the plug on WikiLeaks, blocking access to the site when it was hosted on an Amazon server. All of this is to say, we may not know his exact politics, but Jeff Bezos has a political agenda. He is not disengaged, he's not apathetic. He has an ideology that makes the platform of a major newspaper like the Washington Post quite appealing. How he uses that platform is yet to be seen. Joining us from Rochester, New York is David K. Johnston, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author of The Fine Print, How Companies Use Plain English to Rob You Blind. David, welcome back into the War Room.
Well, thank you for having me, David.
Let's start with what you think about this in general. Did Bezos buy the Post in order to exert political influence? I've heard there's been some speculation that this is a great move for lobbying on behalf of Amazon. Just buy the biggest newspaper in Washington, D.C., and you've got an instrument to exert Amazon.com's political agenda.
Well, if he tries to use it just as a personal vehicle to enrich himself, he's quickly going to discover that won't work because he'll lose all his credibility. Well, we don't know a lot about how Bezos will approach this. We do know a couple of things about him. First of all, he's not part of the legacy newspaper business that's tied to the notion of printing presses and dependence on classified advertising, which has been going away rapidly and was the key to money making in big newspapers. We also know that he is very focused on the long term. Amazon didn't make a penny for 7 years. It makes razor-thin profit margins. Last year, a fraction of a penny on each dollar of sales. But the equity shareholders have in Amazon has been exploding. It went up 55% from the end of 2009 to the end of 2012. That's just 3 years. So I suspect he sees an opportunity to make some money, perhaps not a lot, but some, to show that he can change yet another area of commerce, because no one's had a bigger influence on changing commerce than Jeff Bezos. And I suspect we'll find he's, over time, not initially, but as he gets familiar with the business, he will in fact use his editorial page in some way to further his views, which I suspect won't be that much different than those under the current head of the company, Donald Graham, who, although he grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth, spent 8 years as a uniformed police officer in Washington, D.C., and whose editorial page is virtually all, almost all white, almost all male, warmongering, and opposed to unofficial leaks. Of course, the Washington Post is famous for official leaks.
Let's talk about ownership and how ownership affects reporters in the newsroom. Since the announcement of the sale yesterday, the Post has published 52 separate articles on Jeff Bezos. It's sort of a reminder of the broadcast news quote, "Let's never forget we're the real story, we the media, not them." And it kind of reminded me of that. But most of the commentary from the Post has been optimistic about their new boss, whether that's obsequious or not, who knows. But look, you've worked in newsrooms. What impact does ownership have on reporters? Could there be a chilling effect, for instance, where reporters change their coverage to appease Bezos's political agenda, Amazon.com's desires? How does it work in the newsroom?
Yeah. The way it works in newsrooms, except for Fox News, which is an anomaly, is not as most people imagine. At the New York Times, for example, the publisher often attends the afternoon news meeting where the editors of each section pitch the stories they'd like to get on page one. But when that part of the meeting ends and all the section editors leave the room, so does the publisher. So he may have an idea of what's going to be in the paper the next day, but he has no influence over what goes on page one and what ends up inside each section. In fact, I was told when I worked there that Arthur Sulzberger had stayed twice to say something after everyone had left, and they were relatively innocuous things. A newsroom is full of a bunch of highly neurotic and very competitive, at least historically, people who you're not going to be able to tell them what to do. And that's what makes Fox such an oddity. They hand out to their extremely highly paid talent directives as to what they generally want them to do. That's not how newsrooms work. The way the publisher influences things is he picks the editors, so the top editor. So if the top editor is someone like Bill Thomas when he ran the LA Times, who in many ways was a great genius, but who also didn't want to challenge authority and like nice soft features, you get a paper that's a little spongier. If you put Gene Roberts in charge, as Knight Ridder did at the Philadelphia Inquirer, you get the toughest investigative reporting America has ever seen. So that's where his influence will be.
And so then the follow-up question to that is, what does all this mean in general? If we've got more and more of these Citizen Kane-like figures buying up newspapers, forgetting about whether newspapers are going to be profitable or not, what does this mean for the average American reader? What does it mean for American democracy? I mean, this is a shift. What do you think it actually means in terms of real-world impact?
I think that if it leads to competition, if what happens is the Koch brothers buy the LA Times, Jeff Bezos has the Washington Post, Mayor Bloomberg, as I predict will happen, buys the New York Times because the Sulzbergers have run through their money and can't invest in it the way they need to. And this leads to competition and gets us away from the stenography that Aaron Sorkin's The Newsroom skewers so brilliantly every Sunday night. And leads
but is it competition?
That'll be good.
I mean, is it competition when you've got cities where most cities are now not 2 newspaper towns, 3 newspaper towns like they used to be? Most news environments, granted, except for the national news environment, Washington, right, but most cities, they're consolidated. It's a monopoly situation.
Well, and that's what went wrong with newspapers, is when they became monopolies, they stopped, got away from the study of breaking news. We used to have a saying in the LA Times newsroom, if it didn't appear in the LA Times, it didn't happen, regarding news in Southern California. But these guys have different interests. I mean, Mayor Bloomberg does not have the same worldview as the Koch brothers, although they're both multi-billionaires. And they're going to appoint editors who have different points of view. Now, that's the hope. What can go wrong here, of course, is we end up with news organizations that all have at the top libertarian editors who hate government, who believe the worst possible thing that exists is tax, that's a vile 4-letter word. And we end up then without the tools we need to monitor monitor politics and government and other big institutions in a way that holds them to account. What we have right now is newspapers that are way too lapdog. I mean, we have to turn to The Guardian a British newspaper to know about our government lying to us about spying is a screaming indictment of the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Los Angeles Times.
You have written a lot about taxes, so let's use an example out of your writing. If you were a reporter at the Washington Post and you were on the tax beat, a beat that you've been on, and you know that Amazon.com has fought a lot of tax fights in a scorched earth kind of way, a lot of in the political arena, would it go through your mind as a reporter that, hey, maybe I don't want to write an adversarial piece about the unfairness of Amazon, for instance, not having to pay internet sales taxes? Would that kind of thinking be in your mind?
No, but it would probably be in the thinking of the senior editors. If you write a story that goes to the publisher about what the publisher's doing, the very senior editors are going to know about it, and they're going to tread a little gingerly because they've got to have respect in the newsroom to get what they want. But they're the ones who are going to be concerned about it. They're the ones who are likely to feel somewhat inhibited about what to do, and their response to it could well be, geez, maybe we need to send Johnston to do an extensive investigation of beaches in the Caribbean.
Well, that might be a nice vacation for you. At least you'd get that out of it. David K. Johnston, as always, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. Coming up, Mayor Michael Bloomberg already tells New Yorkers what to drink. So why shouldn't he tell them what to think? Sam Cedar and our very own Michael Shore explain the thinking behind Michael Bloomberg's potential future purchase of the New York Times. Then, that is a photo of a drone allegedly captured on Instagram by Yemeni citizens last night. That's right, our drones are in Yemen, and thanks to social media, it's not a secret anymore. And later, the prolific documentarian Alex Gibney joins us for an exclusive interview. He's the director of We Steal Secrets, and I'll try to get out all his secrets on Julian Assange, Bradley Manning, and WikiLeaks. It's Tuesday night, you're in the War Room, and it's only on Current TV.